We're gonna light her up like Skylar from Breaking Bad.
She kind of deserves it. She
didn't stand by her man.
As soon as she could. Oh, the Gaga blog means we're live.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Well, if we're live, then we might as well get to it. Hello, everybody. Here we are once again.
Hello.
Welcome back.
This time talking about a very odd movie that I never thought that I would see.
Yeah. So it's an old one. This movie came out in 93. But Hannah and I watched it a couple years ago, and since then, or since like at least it's sort of popular in the mainstream right now with all this stuff, we decided to give it a go and see what Jose thought.
Yeah. It's been on the list for a while just because like this movie had a big impact on me because it's based on a true story and is a very crazy story, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So, Jose.
How long ago did you guys watch this movie for the first time? Or, like, know about the story, I guess?
Probably 2.5 to 3 years ago. So it's been a long time for us. So we were, like, there were a lot of parts of this movie that I had forgotten about.
And I remember, I had seen this movie years ago when I was a kid, but I didn't remember it. And that's the whole reason we picked it back up and watched it again.
Gotcha.
Well, and it came up in a podcast that you were listening to.
Oh, that's
about,
true.
Like UFOs and aliens because of the story that it's based on.
Yeah. Shout out to Last Podcast on the Left. They did a really good job on this story. That's that's what rekindled my interest, I guess you could say.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah.
Well, damn.
It's got a big backstory in our history.
Yeah, so true story aside, coming in, I tried to tell you about that the movie was based on a true story, but I don't know. What are your initial impressions?
I believe him.
You believe that?
For
Good enough.
context.
Yeah, I believe him.
All right, well, let me just stop this stream and we're good to go.
Sometimes we're able to knock it out early. You know what I mean? It doesn't always have to be super long.
Yeah, for context, we usually tell Jose nothing about the movies that we're going to watch before we get into them, but we did call out before we got into this movie that this is based on a true story because I think it's valuable to see the movie through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting to say it that way, right? Like based on a true story, because we don't know if that's true. Like, but it's based on an honest story. Like everyone every actor like that has to do with the incident at hand has been proven through multiple instances of scrutiny, both in their community and legally, and through time too.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever it is that they're telling, is to the best of their recollection what they perceived to occur, right?
Yeah, and a big part of like it being quote unquote based on a true story is like we brought in this amount of law enforcement. We performed 2 polygraph tests. Like that stuff is true.
There was a group of guys that came back from a logging trip and reported this story as happening. For the most part, the movie does a really good job of sticking to exactly what the facts of the matter are, at least what the people are saying in the story. Mm-hmm. The whole scene where we see Travis in the ship, he describes that differently. That's a bit of movie magic. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, what Hannah said was true. They all were submitted to polygraph tests once and then twice. And the validity of such tests aside, like, it's a pretty interesting factoid about the story.
Because 5 people are involved, we have no confidence in the accuracy of polygraph tests, but with that many people telling the same story and especially if they didn't get along, is still pretty remarkable.
No, that's very true. And, speaking of polygraph tests, it would be interesting to, like, I wonder if, like, I know that at this point in our time, like, they've been proven to be inconclusive to the degree that you can't really use them in admissibility in court.
Yep.
But I would want, but we know that now, right? Like, when you see a polygraph test, you, like, all of, like, that paragraph, goes through your mind. It's like, this is inadmissible in court. Like, there's a lot of, you know what I mean? So I wonder if you as an individual in the 1970s not having that, that scrutiny toward the machine, right? And actually having the opposite of being like, oh, it's a lie detector test. Like, this should be able to tell us, you know what I mean, the closest approximation to the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, reference to it that Dallas made, I think, was very, very on point for that because it was accepted as truth. He was like, those are very scary. It's like, if you told the truth and it says you lied, you lied. Mm-hmm. Like, everybody's going to believe the polygraph test.
Yep. Yeah, and I wonder, like, if there's something, if there's There probably is, which is probably it adds to the inadmissibility of it, right? The fact that like your perception of believing that the machine can tell you an objective fact would skew your ability to be able to actually use the machine accordingly. But then I don't know. It's like because because it can go both ways, right? If you feel like you're calm because you know you're telling the truth, right? The machine, like you feel like the machine will just vindicate you at that point. Because you don't know the result until after the fact. But if you're like Dallas at that point, it really is difficult because, again, like we were saying during the movie, they ask him non-dual questions. Sure, they can say yes or no when we ask you, did you like Travis? But what is it? What does that mean?
In reality, what does it mean? Like maybe he cracked a joke I liked once. I don't.
I know a big part of that though is to like ask some questions that will make
to rattle.
Yeah, that will make the person uncomfortable, so that you can observe the responses, and that's why they ask them the easy questions at first. Your name is this. My shirt is this color. Things like that, and they get increasingly difficult, and then they get into like the real questions.
Yeah.
But before we get too deep into polygraph tests, we should probably talk overarching themes first. Jose, did you like the movie?
I did. I thought that the movie was very, very well made, especially considering its time. Again, like it just drips 90s. Like the entire movie
oozes 90s.
Yeah, like the entire movie's production to the quality to I don't even know if they have like this particular blue tint on like in particular scenes that just seems like very archetypal at this point, essentially, of that decade's type of movies. So to me that just hits a very resonant point. I like it. I liked all the characters. I'm always a really big fan of no nonsense characters, especially gruff people like that. It reminds me of Supernatural a lot.
I get reminded of Daryl from The Walking Dead by quite a few of the characters at different points in the movie.
Just their abrasiveness toward everything. Even if they know for a fact that they're innocent, they're like, especially Dallas, like I'm sure like he's just been accused so many times at this point that there's just like what's the point of trying to like fight for my innocence at this point if no one's gonna believe me, if just from my countenance and demeanor they're gonna assume that
and his record
that I'm that I'm the scapegoat, and I mean he was entirely on point about the fact that that's what he assumed would have happened, and it isn't it isn't too difficult to say that in another movie, the pivot aspect would have just been they never find Travis, and now they have to figure out some way to actually close this whole case down because that Montana sheriff isn't going to go home without a win.
Yeah, the investigation won't stop, regardless of whether or not they find Travis.
Especially because you would imagine that, it's one thing if somebody just goes missing, right? Like. Eventually that quiets down, on its own. Sure, the family might continue to call on everything, but eventually life does go on. But then you have to add this extra, like, extraordinary intersection with the UFOs, and now you probably have the governor, of Arizona calling the people of, the sheriff of Snowflake being like, what on earth is happening here? You know what I mean? Like, this isn't, this is not the kind of publicity that we need coming through the state,
Right, all the reporters and everything showing up.
And there were witnesses to him going missing, so you can't just be like, there's no suspects, we don't know anything, and slowly drop the case. Like, it's either what they said is true, or one of you killed him, presumably, because you're lying.
You all did.
Yeah, some narrative would have to win out in that way, and I would have to imagine it would have to be the most humdrum narrative that, like, that's what the system would want, you know what I mean? And Dallas sees that from very far away, that it's like, listen, I'm a very easy guy to just put, you know what I mean, in front of the newspaper. You know what I mean? It's like, boom, one and done, we're done. Yep. Nobody thinks about it. All of you are exonerated, essentially. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, like it must have been very, very difficult from his angle, you know what I mean, to take it all in, especially considering the fact that none of those guys are his friends, right? Like, he has absolutely no ties to any of them. He just met them all last week for the first time.
He's been mean to everybody since.
Yeah, he's managed to be able to create no rapport with any of them.
Yeah, not a fun guy to be around.
No, not whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I liked I sort of like Travis. I mean, I saw the kind of like character, you know, that they were trying to build toward him, that he would be the kind of guy who would get out of a truck when there's a spaceship, you know what I mean, outside.
Yeah, they really hammered home that he's a quote unquote dreamer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Aloof to a fault.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard being Paul Rudd's older brother, you know, and
And finding good work without really hamming it up.
Yeah. Living in that shadow. How do you do it? I don't know.
Oh man, yeah. I honestly, every single time that there was even a medium shot with Travis, just Paul Rudd's face is just like
yeah, you just replace it in
yeah,
your brain.
like it's scary almost, you know, like especially
when you remember the movie, you're just picturing like you just put Paul Rudd in it.
Oh yeah, wasn't that one with Paul Rudd and the T-1000 from Terminator 2? I remember that movie. Yeah, that was a great movie.
Oh man, I felt really bad for Travis though. I mean, if we can jump around like the situations, like, because one thing that I would think of, it's like you don't know the kind of powers that those aliens have, right? So it's like, so if we like give in to the concept that he did get abducted entirely, right, and now he's to the whims, you know, he's at the whims of the aliens. One thing that I was thinking about when he had that PTSD moment was like, man, like what if they like fucked with him temporally, you know what I mean? Where like even though he's home, he's still on the spaceship kind of situation, you know. And like the reason why it's so vivid to him is essentially just like a short circuiting
happening now.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
Especially if he woke up in that like Matrix-like pod, right?
Yeah.
It's like you'd imagine that perhaps it could, you know, like it could very well be that. You know, that section, you know, and obviously I don't think it was because the movie seems to be pretty straightforward and straight arrow as to like, you know, the events of things, but just playing with it, right? Like it does seem like the jarring, you know, between him being under the table and like the syrup like touching him and like him quote unquote waking up, you know what I mean, in the pod. Right. Like it's pretty much screams the Matrix, you know, like in terms of even the visuals, you know, of like him breaking through the skin. Right. Or whatever and everything, like
and like climbing his way out.
And I mean, and the when he was all, you know,
wired up.
Wired up, and I was gonna say Clockwork Orange. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's a good reference.
Yeah.
The machine that comes down, you know, even though it's just like a red laser, I mean, even that looks like one of the robots from the Matrix. You know what I mean? Without like the chassis and the squid-like
squiddies,
squiddies. Yeah, it makes me wonder how much the Wachowski siblings might have gotten, you know, some form of inspiration, at least aesthetic-wise, perhaps from this movie, right? Especially if, you know, this movie's 7 years before the fact, right? You imagine that they started writing that story 4 or 5 years, you know what I mean? Like, after watching this movie or whatever, right? And just
among a plethora of others, I'm sure.
Just a whole bunch of different things, yeah. Because... man, like, it just makes, again, like, just wanting to believe Travis, right? Like, okay, aliens abducted you. And, like, as we were saying, it's like, but, like, why them? You know what I mean? Is it just like a matter of, like, wrong place, wrong time, you know? Is it, like...
complete chance, or...
Well, and what I get hung up on especially, too, is, like, why did he get put back? You know, like, just dropped off somewhere 5 days later, especially if we're just talking movie. I have no idea if this has any accuracy to, like, the anecdotal story, but with him finding, like, basically another human dead body on the ship, it's like, what prompted him being returned to the planet?
Yeah, especially because it seemed like they did that, like, saran wrap thing on him, right?
Yeah.
Like, for preservation.
I think that was to hold him still if they're going to be jabbing a needle in his eye.
Like it was the only way to keep him from moving around or something.
Oh, okay. My mind was going for like more of a preservation aspect of like keeping him like, you know, like saran wraps fresh.
It's very strange. There's a lot of like really weird things about the story of this movie that are reminiscent, and it's, you know, it's hard to play it out, but a lot of points of fact that Travis states happened to him are similar to other abductee stories, and that's one of the things that gives this story a little more credence or whatever. But as far as the facts go, like you were saying a minute ago, when he showed up 5 days later, he was 5 days dehydrated and hungry. And he stayed in the hospital for this amount of time.
I think he was naked in the real story.
Yeah, in
too.
the real story as well.
80 miles away from his home.
Or at least what they recounted. And then another interesting thing was
Did he have any bruises, any lesions on?
I don't remember. That part. I remember a couple things about the story specifically because last podcast did such a great job of recounting it. But another thing that really caught my attention was the syrup in the mouth and the sticky sweet thing that caused the flashback or the forward back. It could have been
current back.
Yeah. But that's another one of the things that people recount in abductee stories is this sticky, sweet taste in their mouth throughout the experience, which is something really interesting. All of these, I don't know. I feel like there's this sort of deeper level questioning or understanding of because when it comes to people's personal experiences, right, and when they relate them to us, it's hard to take the skeptical part of yourself away and volunteer to play along with that kind of storytelling, because it could be the case that Yahweh actually exists, or that Vishnu actually exists, because people report having experiences with these things, just the same as aliens. And I just find it, this movie really strikes me as something that puts the theme of that question on the forefront, where it's all you have is the anecdotal evidence of these 5 lumberjacks telling the story.
I would say that. Yeah, I would say, to counter what you're saying, right, in terms of if aliens are real, perhaps Yahweh and Vishnu are real too, I would say that there are at least some degrees of separation, between the concept that a hyper-intelligent species can, travel through space, and then a transcendental being, that is multiversal. You know what I mean? Sure, they're both improbable, you know what I mean? But at the same time, if we're looking at the amount of zeros on one side, in terms of what's what, I would say that, Travis's story, even in that aspect, I'm far more willing to believe that he got abducted than that somebody was able to see God. You know what I mean?
For sure. Math is on the side of the aliens. There's no question.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to put that little pin in, because I am also, a very skeptical person, but at the same time, I try to give my due, to, the echelon of, a skeptic thought, right? It's if you're trying to throw, if you're trying to, make me believe in an all-powerful creature, that's a whole lot of things to say, you know what I mean? And, show me then, there's the potentiality that some species out there was able to get through all of the great filters, and now they travel through through a funky mushroom, you know what I mean, through space, honestly, that is it's still way more probable than anything else, especially if we consider that, in the evolutionary scale of this, on this planet, fungi have had a lot longer time, just existing and stuff like that. And they've actually made themselves a primordial section of the ecosystem, and the vitamin movement throughout the forests and stuff like that, right? So it's a fungus as, I guess, as an entire section of the the animal kingdom, has quite a lot. There's quite a lot to be said about the potentiality that some crazy hyper fungus might actually have been able to, construct, or make itself buoyant enough to just fly off into space in some way,
Yeah. I agree definitely with the likelihood side of what you're saying, but I also think that this is a lot more than simply anecdotal, simply an anecdote, or simply one person's experience. What we do know is this person went missing for 5 days, And like the 4 or 5 other people on his crew had the pretty much exact same story of what happened. And when he reappeared, basically under very odd circumstances, corroborated the story. So to me, it's like, I can't think of many other options.
Mm-hmm. And I think,
it's like, what else, like, what happened? What could have happened? Like, they didn't attack him and tie him up somewhere because he probably wouldn't have shared the story if that was the case.
They attacked me and tied me up somewhere. Yeah. They're liars.
Yeah, so it's just like a very weird situation in that way to me.
For sure.
Especially, like, there's a ton of pressure on them in this situation. If there's anything about this story that any of them were doubting, I would think that one of them would have broken. Because this is not a story that you'd want to tell the public. This is not a story you want to get put on a murder trial with. Like, there's a lot going on here.
Especially considering that there would be no way that all of them killed him, right? It isn't like, so, like, the only other option is somebody's covering for somebody. But even that, even that is an asymmetrical consideration because...
And they don't like each other.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was getting at. I was like... And again, Dallas knows it. You know what I mean? It's like the story just makes itself essentially at that point. If you want a mundane reason why this guy never came back, you know what I mean? It's because this guy murdered him. You know what I mean?
And Dallas, like, from at least the movie character Dallas, he wouldn't cover for anybody, and no one would cover for him. Like, like that's a self-defeating situation.
Yeah, but just to kind of go back to the spaceship, I wanted to really give merit and props to the movie and their decision to make make the spaceship mushroom. Like, I've never seen that be used before, and I really liked it just from the consideration of, like, fungus have a long time. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't take a lot for one species of fungus to get really smart. You know what I mean? And want to go do something like that, right?
It's a likely unknown natural.
Yeah. And on top of that, I liked it from the perspective of, like, maybe what they do is they, like, go off and, like, maybe they sometimes kill people, you know what I mean? But maybe most of the time they just kill, like, game out in the forest, and that's why they're out in the forest. And what they do is they pretty much put the animal or whatever, you know what I mean, into those folds, and then they just allow it to, like, slowly but surely decompose, and then, like, the nutrients and minerals feeds the spaceship and feeds the spacesuit, men that are inside of there too,
Yeah, it was an interesting choice, I think, to use the classic gray imagery for the spacesuits of the actual aliens instead of that being the aliens themselves.
Yeah.
With the big almond eyes and the small mouth and everything. And then they actually end up looking more humanoid.
With a lot of expression.
Yeah. And very, very oddly. Which is interesting because the ship was like a fungus. And then the aliens themselves weren't very fungusy. Or they didn't look like Last of Us enemies or anything like that, so... But yeah,
it could be I mean, just to have fun with it, right? I mean, it could be a situation of symbiosis, right? Where it's like, maybe on this planet, I mean, the planet where they're from, mushrooms are,
like dogs,
just gigantic. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, and they're maybe they have, like, some sort of, like, more, like, a means of being able to, like, communicate with the mushrooms easier. You know what I mean? In the same way that the trees are able to communicate with the mushrooms and telling them, hey, move the nutrients over there, you know what I mean? Like, those trees are dying, you know what I mean? Like,
if you want to stay alive, keep them alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And trying to, keeping them more symbiotic like that. And then at that point, it's like, who's the intelligent one? Is it the aliens that are walking around like us, or is it the mushrooms, you know what I mean, that give the,
It's like that whole idea of humans are just the precursor for AI, and AI is the real deal, so to speak.
I have always liked the idea that if there is any sort of predestination, it's like an artificial intelligence far in the future, right? That what it wants to do now is try to cement itself in as many multiverses as possible. So then it pretty much just finds some way to be able to, like, re-influence, essentially, like, pasts to all get to this nexus point where it's always existed, essentially.
I think the Christians would like this kind of talk. It's very consistent.
Yeah.
Very consistent. Yeah, that's cool, man. it fascinates me, the entire subject of UFOs and alien abductions and everything, and because it's like so popular right now, I'm every day on the UFO Reddit, scrolling through, looking at videos and shit. And one of the things that I have to constantly check myself with is how much I want to believe that something like that exists. And so I think it's important to I don't know, just expose yourself to that the heterodox ideas as much as possible, if only to juxtapose your own hubris when it comes to things like that.
Right. And I mean, within the realm of fantastical probabilities, right? Aliens still rank pretty low. You know, it's like there's it's far more likely that that UFO will appear than a dragon. You know what I mean? Will, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like there's just so many other things. There's so many other things that are just far more fantastical in the concept that there are creatures that are more intelligent than us that have been able to send probes or whatever, you know, and they're curious, especially, and that they're ethically ambiguous too. I mean, I would imagine that there would have to be quite a lot of like supremacy thinking in their being. You know what I mean? If they're the kind of creature that can just, zoom all throughout the galaxy, or even a couple stars. Let's say that they got a dozen stars that they've been able to lock it down on, right? Like, they're doing like baby space dives at this point. Like I would imagine that they can't fucking wait to go and like examine every creature and planet that they can get their hands on.
We would.
Yeah, every time we're somewhere and we're like, what the fuck is that thing? Let's take pictures of it. Kill one. We'll take it back.
Yeah, yep. And I just think, like, if we were able to accomplish that, like the U.S. government, for example, and we started, like traveling more extensively in space and found another planet with, like, alien life, I feel pretty confident that the U.S. government would abduct some people. Because it's minimal risk. You get some more information.
Nobody has to know about it.
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you want to get super conspiratorial, it could even
we do.
It could even well be that, aliens could choose to do some sort of, trade where, like, we'll give you low-level tech that we know is within the parameters of, like, your capacity, right?
You won't kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but you'll have fun. Don't worry. Like, things will get a little better. Not, and then you turn a blind eye, what I mean, to whatever it is. Like, whatever supraculture we have, right, turns a blind eye to the concept that aliens are constantly visiting us and they're constantly, like, abducting us, right? Because all it genuinely takes, again, to build that kind of skepticism is for people to continue telling you that stuff isn't true, right? And for every single time that an anecdotal fact, as we called it, comes up, everybody's predisposition is to not believe them already, right? And that comes from the culture, any further than just, being a natural skeptic at that point, which is why I feel, sometimes I have a lot of sympathy for people who have, the desire to want to believe in UFOs, because they do feel like they're against the grain in that way too, because already the culture tells you, probably not real, right? And then shit, like, but what if it is in this instance, Like, how exactly do we go about parsing that if we're not even able to come into a consensus as to whether the phenomenon is real or not?
Yeah, I heard somebody say that they're like they feel like they're a mix between Mulder and Scully. Like, they want to believe, but they also need the data.
Yeah.
It's a tough tightrope.
Yeah, I feel totally, like, 50-50 about it. Like, I don't feel like I necessarily, like, think it's true or anything like that, but I also think, especially now, with, like, the government releasing, like, what was it, like 144 cases of, like, unexplained flying phenomena, and, like, one of the 144 were explained, and it's like, there's, like, videos, they're like, we have no idea what this is.
We don't know what that is.
That. Yeah, like, we don't have anything, we can't even figure out how this is propelling itself, we have no idea, and, like, that to me is, like, I feel like 50-50. That could easily be, like, something extraterrestrial or something that's, like, in a different dimension here that's, like, crossing the barrier. Or it could be, like, you know, some like crazy geniuses in like a tucked away shack somewhere, you know, building crazy technology.
Or you'd imagine that, okay, we as a species have only had radio communications and the ability to even receive like the most rudimentary of frequencies for less than 100 years so far, right? If there were aliens making continual, if there are, let's say, aliens making continual routes between their system and ours, right? And they're advanced enough to be able to get to, like, let's say 20% speed of light, right? It would still take them 10, 20 years, you know what I mean, to get there, to get back, right? So what if, you know what I mean, like, in the last round, they left in the 1900s, you know what I mean, or the 1880s, right? And they're like, okay, well, you know, things, they got that coal situation going on. That seems pretty cool, you know what I mean? Like,
it should be fine.
Yeah, they Yui right on back, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, like, whoa, what the fuck? They're seeing us all over the place, you know what I mean? Like,
who told Brian to go down there? Brian!
Yeah. I mean...
Now every time we show up, they're pointing their little square devices at us.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, we don't need, like, I would imagine that just like with Morse code, you know what I mean? Like, how it's getting, like, outmoded and outdated, that perhaps, like, the kind of frequencies that we use, you know what I mean? Like, on an advanced spaceship, they wouldn't even consider those to be necessary in that way. Like, no, we don't bring Morse code machines on our spaceship, you know what I mean? Like, why would we bring, you know what I mean? Like, if the species is using radio communications to try to speak to us, then they probably shouldn't be speaking to us anyway. You know what I mean? So, like we probably aren't even gonna bother even having like a communication array that can like pick it up and like potentially send some sort of like, you know, like we might as well not even bring it. You know what I mean? Like we might as well just communicate with whatever hi-fi, you know, I mean like li-fi situation, but you know, light, you know. Communication we use that they don't know the frequency for, so that we can just stay above the level, you know. And again, that's well within the concepts of, you know, a species that isn't even that crazy technological, because it still takes them decades upon decades to get from one section to the other, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
And again, my personal interest is like the, you know, the ethical aspect of the of the aliens, right? Because if they are advanced, right, maybe they've met other species that are like a tiny bit smarter than we are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're still smarter, right? But they've met like an even like more middle like of the road species than we are. So we're like more simian and like chimpanzee than even like what they would consider, you know what I mean, like a middle class species, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you know, we'll take one. I mean, we're only taking one. Like,
you're not gonna care.
Yeah.
Actually, live to like 70. It's fine.
Chimpanzee is like kind of a cool word for that, I think, because it's like if they are like much more advanced, you know, and more ethically advanced potentially, like we could literally be seen by something like that as like an impulsive, potentially violent, like caveman type species.
And to give the devil its due, I mean, they were pretty ethical in the sense that they brought him back. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't always bring them back because maybe they die in transit.
Right.
You know, like perhaps a lot of the issues, I mean, you know, because we only saw a couple bodies within the pod jellies, right? That were like...
We only saw one, didn't we? And then like some
Well, I saw like glasses
stuff.
and like shoes and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna assume that there were perhaps other bodies with, you know, in there, and it wasn't just that one old lady or that guy that's half. Oh, actually, that guy that's half dead actually makes a lot of credence to my consideration that like they used the bodies to like slowly decompose them away. Yeah.
Because he was like, it didn't look like normal decomposition.
Because he was still alive. Yeah, but
he was alive.
Yeah,
well,
he went for him. Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was just floating around in there because
I think it was still like jellied up and.
Yeah, like his upper half was actually going for Travis on that moment, you know.
I've watched this movie twice now, and 100% I thought he was like dead and just floating around because of the gravity situation.
And you know, I have a picture. I have a Pokemon card that I won in a tournament playing Pokemon like 10 years ago professionally, and I still keep it. And like, why not keep the shoe or the sunglasses or the hat? Like,
It's good
that's great
memorabilia.
flair. I mean,
It's great memorabilia for
Yeah.
sure. And again,
From an alien planet?
to go back to giving the devil its due, right? The aliens brought fucking Travis back, right?
Yeah.
Sure, he might have not eaten, but again, it's like what? Like I'm sure that they probably tried to feed him, but it's like, oh, he doesn't take the fungus food. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
I'm
he's
sure.
not
I guess,
eating the
yeah.
brown jelly.
Yeah.
Everybody likes the brown,
the brown jelly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, these
It's
apes.
sweet, it's
These
sticky,
apes.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Like it handles all the glucose, and you know what I mean? It's like,
Your blood sugar is falling, Travis.
Yeah,
Travis.
that's one thing that I was thinking about too in terms of that is they probably have no, not no idea. I'm sure they've learned a few things as they've gone on, considering they've been doing this for a while based on what we see in their ship. But they probably don't know how to keep a human alive, you know?
Right.
yeah, for
We
sure.
have one. And I think Steve got one a couple years ago. That's his shoe.
Yeah, because you can't ever keep a human as a pet, right? So you'll never be able to like actually like come to an understanding of like what it needs. You know what I mean? Like, and if they, especially if they don't understand our language, right? I mean, it doesn't really look like they did, or you know, or if they did, they totally ignored it. I don't
Right.
know. Yeah, like,
Shut up.
yeah,
Put the thing in his mouth.
yeah. Seriously, this
I
is
mean-
really annoying.
He was mostly just screaming.
keeps
Like,
screaming. Yeah, when I think about like abduction stories like this, I always for some reason reference back to Contact and that type of scenario being the case, as it were, and there's
Or
like
we go looking for them.
no, just like this.
Am I thinking about the right one? Is that the Tom Cruise? I mean, is that the one with John Travolta, or are we talking about the Jodie Foster one?
Jodie Foster,
Okay.
Matthew McConaughey, yeah.
Okay.
So like the aliens in that movie in Sagan's story are like, we just pick one at random every now and then, and we sort of let them in on a little bit of the truth, and then we send them back and hope that you guys fucking advance to the point where eventually you can come to the quorum and everything will be jelly. But yeah, so it's just it strikes me as weird that there's this stark contrast of the way that we think about aliens in this like basically anthropomorphized sense of like, oh, either they're like benevolent regenerators or they're these like creepy weird mushroom folks who are like, what the fuck is this thing, and they're poking it in its mouth and I don't know what that is, get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the only two modalities that we really know, right? It's like we're either very curious, you know what I mean, or we're trying to figure out some way to be kinder, I guess. You know what I mean? Like that's the only two means by which we like try to say that we're making some form of progress, right? It's like we either excuse our meanness because we're trying to be genuinely curious about something, you know, or we're like, if there's nothing to be curious about, like let's just be nice to each other. Then I guess I mean, like, yeah.
It's the best we can do right now.
Yeah, until the next cool thing comes up and we can be curious about it.
Yeah.
And then we'll politicize it and argue about it.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that the human race has done some pretty atrocious things in the name of advancement.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and we don't have a good track record of bringing people back to like their people alive.
No.
Yeah, that
I mean,
almost
even if-
never happened.
Yeah, I mean, even in terms of like slavery, you know, like enslaving other people to like advance yourself economically, and I guess probably part of that was like understanding a different race of people because that was a new thing.
Yeah. Especially not, I mean, in those situations, I think it would even be closer to what the aliens feel, right? Because, like, if we use, like, just say, like, you know, pre-antebellum America, right? A lot of white people, I'm sure, never even saw a black person prior to actually, like, you know, seeing them as slaves, right? So, you know, your considerations as to, like, the essential, like, what the essential principles of those people are, you know what I mean, are just built upon what you are seeing, you know, them as. You don't see, you know what I mean, the kingdoms and the villages and the, you know, all the stuff that is like, actively occurring in Africa, you know what I mean, that, you know, that humanizes them to the degree that you'd be able, oh yeah, like, oh shit, they're just slaves, like they got like their ancestors got caught, you know what I mean, and now now they're here, you know what I mean, like.
Well, they also like to eat and fuck. That's weird. I don't know. Oh shit, they laugh.
Yeah,
and
so
cry.
I'm sure that the aliens probably feel, I mean, to an even greater degree, that level of depersonalization, right, to us as subjects in that way, because I mean, if we're able to do it intra-species, right, like fuck, I mean, like what?
Yeah.
How could they possibly care about another, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that fine line of like, I think it's just the crazy dichotomies in the way that we all sort of think about these things of like, why the hell would they give a shit about us in any sort of aspect?
Well,
And then at the same time, we're like, look at this crab. It's different than all the other crabs we've ever seen.
Well, we do that, but we're also like, if you're talking like other species and like getting into animals, we totally abuse and utilize animals for our own
100%.
comfort and personal gain.
Not only that, but you could also say that knowledge is a form of domination to a particular degree too, right? Because you know, the more you're able to categorize things, the more you're able to figure that they're not a threat. You know what I mean? The more you're, you know, and just place them in a particular, again, an echelon of like importance and, you know, potential like significance also. Like, for example, like people in the 1800s probably didn't know like the importance of coral reefs, right? Like they're just like, oh, you know, pretty cool shit.
Like, nice,
yeah. Yeah. Now, you know, now that we're able to go down there and see like the significant impact that their being there makes, you know what I mean, to like the entire ecosystem, you know what I mean, of it, right? Like now it isn't just pretty rocks anymore, you know what I mean? Like it's like you're actually dealing with, you know, like a linchpin aspect of an entire ecosystem. But you don't, but you know, but they're still just pretty rocks, right? You know, no matter what, it's like the only thing that's changed is the, you know, your knowledge base as to that. And you know, and sometimes the only way that can happen is through like, oh shit, the coral reefs are calcifying. Oh damn, the fish are dying. Right? Like you can only ever see like the reason why things are chained together until the chain starts breaking apart in that way.
Yeah. Well, and like what I think of too is like Matt and I are like vegetarians, and pretty often when people ask us about it, we have conversations like people ask us like why, and we talk about it a little bit. And the things that I hear from a lot of people, not everybody by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of people who are not vegetarians and eat meat are like, oh, they're just animals, or oh, they don't really have the mental capacity to like understand, or if you're into the more religious sect, like they don't have souls, they're here for us, you know. And I don't understand like why an alien wouldn't think of us like that as like a lesser advanced species. Like they don't understand, they don't have the mental faculties, they're not really people, you know.
No. And even if, and that's the thing, it's like, because you consider a pig, right? A pig has quite a high mental acuity for, you know, each individual pig. Is, you know,
they're smarter than dogs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, but we slaughter them, you know, wholesale. And at the same, exactly. And at the same time, you know, it's so strange, right? Because to keep it to the semblance of the pig, like the pig is almost a dual creature in and of itself, because like, you know, we have the domesticated pig, you know, pink and everything like that. But literally the moment that it would escape, you know what I mean? The moment that it would escape, it would begin becoming wild. Like its hair would grow out, you know what I mean? Like it would get rougher. It would get, like. So, you know, and the way we look right here, you know what I mean? Like for all intents and purposes, you know, all of us are essentially pink pigs at this very moment in that kind of way, right? Like, maybe, and maybe the way that they see us, right, like maybe they don't see any real big differentiation between seeing a chimpanzee, you know what I mean, and then seeing us in that way, you know what I mean? It's like, because, you know, we could just say that we've just been able to auto-domesticate ourselves, you know what I mean, or create like some sort of like hyper system that like domesticates us in that way, but like you will wear clothes, you know what I mean, and you will eat in this particular way, you know, like...
You'll groom yourself.
Yeah, And then at that point, I mean... slowly but surely we've gotten to the point that we don't need a master to tell us, you know what I mean, to do that kind of thing, because it's so internalized, right? But at the same time, if you were to end up going, you know, like being dropped in the middle of the woods with some capacity to be able to survive, you know, you'd slowly but surely become essentially a hog in that way, right? So
sandpaper feet and hands and everything.
Yeah, so it's like, the difference is so paper thin, right, between the primal aspect of our past and our current, you know, more cozy version, that a hyper species that maybe has 1,000 years ahead of us, you know what I mean, would just not be, there would be no way to even, like, even if you wanted to make like an ethical consideration to them, you know, like their compendium of like things to care about is so large that they're like, you know, like I get what you're trying to say, you know what I mean? But fuck, dude, we're so far away from like the main planet. It's like
the heat death is in 16 and a half trillion years. We gotta get going.
Yeah,
we gotta get going.
Yeah, and that kind of brings another question into it, is like, could we be looked at more as like pets, you know?
Especially if,
Oh shit.
again, you want to get conspiratorial, you know, like, who's to say, to a particular degree, right, that, you know, a hyper-intelligent species wouldn't groom a planet to look a particular way, or feed it particular, even knowing, like, feed it knowingly, contradictory systems, a la vis-a-vis like communism and capitalism at the exact, like having like the genuine like big resurgence like around the same time. You know what I mean? And just kind of petri dishing it out and just seeing, you know what I mean, like what, you know, what wins out. You know what I mean? Like, because, you know, a lot of people say, you know what I mean, that when it comes to new ideas like that, it almost feels like manna from the heaven feeling. You know what I mean? Of like, oh, I'm getting like this inspiration of this idea of like, you know. Again, conspiratorially, like who's to say, you know what I mean, that you aren't lified, you know what I mean, this idea, you know what I mean, into your brain, and then having like a particular neural like surge essentially happen in your brain, and you're all of a sudden think, oh shit, communism, or oh, like neoliberalism, and you know, like capitalism or whatever, right? And then it's you know, such a good idea, and you know, especially if no one's ever heard of it before in a particular way, right? That it just takes off, you know what I mean, and then they just get to view it, you know what I mean, from on high in that way.
Outside perspective, yeah.
Well, there's just way too many parallels with like video games, simulations, and
again, because and it's the reason why I can bring that up is because I wouldn't put it past us to do that exact thing, right? I mean, especially if we come to a position where, you know, let's give them a little bit more credit. They have 50 planets, you know what I mean? 50 solar systems that they know how to get around, right? Like, they've really gotten good at that boomeranging shit between stars, you know what I mean? Like, and now they can claim, you know what I mean, 50 stars. And they're like, oh, we can get there, you know? So, yeah, and at this point, you know, let's say they know 2-3 other species, none of them as intelligent as them, but each one a little bit more intelligent, right? And then there's us, you know.
And then there's Earth.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so perfectly portrayed in the Douglas Adams.
Yeah, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
This backwater planet.
Well, yeah, because I mean, what other way of thinking would there be? Okay, so they would go to a planet that's going through like feudal times. Are they going to a planet that's like straight cavemen still? You know what I mean? Like, are they going to a planet that's like that just managed to be able to figure its form of agriculture or like mass calorie production? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know, I bet they wouldn't. I bet they wouldn't give a shit about those planets. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I bet it would be really fun to go down once, check out what they look like. You know what I mean? Check out what everybody looks like. Woo them once, and then just fucking dip out. I played No Man's Sky for 120 hours, and I've been to many planets. And honestly, after a while, you only want to be on them for like a minute and a half. You know what I mean? It's like
once
even
there gets to be so many.
It's like, oh, look at that thing. Oh, that's another animal. Okay.
Yeah, that's certainly an animal. Right. Oh, what's it made out of? What's it also made out of?
Scanned it real quick. Gotta go.
Oh shit, that's also carbon.
Yeah, carbon. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Needed some anyway.
Yep. Yeah, honestly, and that game provides unbelievably beautiful vistas, you know. But at the same time, it just becomes just one gigantic, you know, flipping album. You know what I mean? Collage.
Blur in your mind of nothing.
Yeah, eventually so much becomes pretty much nothing.
Yeah. Although, you know, I don't know. There's so many different ways, so many different lines of thinking towards this entire phenomenon of like, because if it is the case that life happens rarely throughout the universe.
Depends on what you mean by rarely.
Right. And as far as we can tell, there isn't life anywhere near us that we could like point at and go, oh yeah, for sure.
Depends on what you mean by near.
Right. As far as we could tell, like it maybe Enceladus, maybe, I don't know, under the ice caps. Like Europa would be a good movie that we could watch. It'd be in the same vein, sort of. But yeah, anyway, you'd think if there were these star hoppers every 50 years going around checking different solar systems here and there, and they find one that has life on it, they might like pin that one, you know, oh, here's one in this fucking billion-year quadrant or whatever that we can actually visit and
There's probably
check on.
a great deal to be learned from watching other species advance.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. And again, there would be a lot to learn from just whispering in their ear, right?
Yeah.
In that way, being like, listen, like you can try it this way, you can try it that way, you know, like.
Yeah, and it might not even be like, you know, like a passion or a need to know thing. It could be some alien's bullshit day job, you know, to visit X planet, take X samples.
It's true. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe the reason why they were so gruff with Travis is because they're just over this shit. You know what I mean? Like
another squirmer.
Yeah, honestly.
How
Yeah,
come
you
they
didn't sign
always
up
give
for
me-
this shit when you left the Mushroom Planet.
The Mushroom Kingdom.
The Mushroom Kingdom, yeah, exactly. When Princess Peach sent you on this mission
That's why. Jesus
to
Christ.
try to find Donkey Kong a
It's
mate.
bleeding into our culture.
Yeah.
The aliens fucking whole world is bleeding in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, interesting that everything looked like a pipe inside of him.
There's no question. No question.
He did
think
try to
we-
escape through the pipe.
Yeah, he did.
I
He's
think we
like,
figured it
uh-oh.
out.
I mean, and just one extra one. I mean, the aliens did look like the Koopas outside of their shell.
Oh my god. They looked exactly like the 90s Super Mario Brothers Koopas, didn't
Yeah. Well, in
Oh
those, well, I don't
my
know. Well,
God.
in those, yeah, goddamn that movie. Oh, that movie was so lame. it's like bugging with my brain because it's like they had like the Goombas with like the big shoulders
Yeah.
and then like the little
they?
faces.
The tiny
right?
little heads.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
they
we,
had really
we didn't want to
sharp
bring up
teeth.
bad memories of the Super Mario movie.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a Super Mario movie.
Oh.
You've never seen the movie with John Leguizamo?
No.
Oh, it's
Oh.
I've
very
played a
weird.
million Super Mario games. I didn't know
Okay,
they
well
made a
this could be an
movie.
interesting.
Oh.
We could do. We
yeah,
could do a
yeah,
Super Mario
we can
Brothers.
flip the script one time and you'll watch the movie for the first time. I
it
don't know what I'll
a
ask
bad
about it
experience?
though. Do you think they could have kept this canon going?
Do you still like John Leguizamo after seeing this movie?
Do you still like the Mario Brothers?
Do you think we should ever do another live action video game movie ever again? Having just seen this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine, seat yourself down in 1993 and imagine, it's like, will they ever make another one?
Is there gonna,
Oh
is
my
there
god.
gonna be a number 2? Please, God, no.
Wait.
No.
Did you say live action?
Oh
Yeah.
my god, yes!
Yes. It's a live action Super Mario's movie. It's made in the 90s.
That sounds so rough.
Oh,
It's weird.
Oh, it's bad, yeah. I mean, John
It's-
Leguizamo is Luigi, and consider the fact that Mario is taller than Luigi in the movie. I
No,
believe.
that's wrong. You casted them wrong.
Yeah.
Luigi has to be taller. It's the only difference aside from the color they wear.
Like, that's wrong is gonna be your mantra
Well,
to
I
the
just-
movie
I
while
just
we're like, no,
literally-
no.
I cannot
Oh
picture.
my gosh.
I cannot picture the Mario Brothers creatures in a live action movie
It's
as
terrifying.
anything outside of like, and I'm sorry, John animation.
Okay, I'm looking at it. I don't want to spoil it,
Just
but
nightmare.
they
I
did
don't wanna
manage to
see
make John Leguizamo
anything.
just a tiny bit taller than the guy who played Mario.
You gotta keep it canon.
Yeah.
You gotta keep it canon.
No, he has to be noticeably taller.
Yeah, but it's not. That's not.
It's
You
an
know how
important
Yoshi
detail.
is a dinosaur? You know how that is a fact?
Yeah.
Well, that is a fact.
Yeah, just
in
think
the
about
movie.
that.
No.
Just think about that.
Like he just looks like a dinosaur.
They took it as literally as they possibly
Yeah,
could.
honestly, like this is an individual
He's
who
like the
maybe has
cutest
never turned
character.
on Nintendo in their life.
Oh my god.
They just read the Mario Brothers
Yeah,
scripts.
imagine,
and then
imagine grabbing like a Super Nintendo and then just reading the instruction pamphlet and then
Wait.
figuring that's the.
That's pretty much how
Does
they did
Yoshi,
it, right?
as a real dinosaur, lay eggs in the live-action movie?
I don't think so.
I don't think they ever got into that.
It doesn't
no.
even sound like they were trying.
They definitely weren't. It is very apparent that they were just like, they gave us a bunch of money.
But I mean,
we gotta spend it somehow.
If we're sticking
Like, as a
to
T-Rex, did they make him?
He's kind of like a little velociraptor.
What do you mean?
She said, this is my favorite. Well, that movie just has a lot to be spoken about. I mean,
it kind of ties in pretty well, actually.
Especially if you consider the aesthetic aspects of that movie, because when they go to the Mushroom Kingdom, they use a lot of that same like weird like glue thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Is Toad like a little guy with a mushroom hat?
I don't think Toad is in that movie.
What do you mean Toad isn't in the movie?
No.
He has
And
to be.
I don't think there's like a Princess Peach either.
no, there is a
There is?
Princess Peach. Yeah, there is, but she's not a princess.
Oh, she's just some broad.
Yeah,
I'm totally. And what? The Mario Brothers are just plumbers, or what?
just plumbers. They're plumbing brothers. All right.
With a pet dinosaur.
No.
Well, listen, we're not gonna give away the whole movie, okay?
Yeah, okay, we gotta watch the movie.
Yeah. That plus we're talking about another movie right now. I think.
How does that take over every conversation we have about movies?
Well, the Super Mario movie is just like the mushroom it's based on. It just quickly just grows and just envelops everything.
Well, this is literally our first chat on the podcast, so by popular demand, we're gonna have to do a tangent episode.
Where we just jump from one movie to
From
the
one
next.
movie to the next,
Yeah, that reminds me of
No, we have
this
to watch the
fucking
Mario
terrible
Brothers one. I'm gonna watch it by myself if we don't, because I'm just like too wildly curious at this point.
Oof, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to have it on the roster, just to have it on the YouTube channel,
It
just to
would
say
be
that.
a bad-
Yeah.
we could throw it up
I
there.
mean, not a lot of people bother to actually give it a fair shake, you know.
We select the
You
movies.
think we could get an hour out of that?
We've gotten like 15 minutes out of trying to lightly step around what the movie's about to her. Like,
No, and like, so Matt and I select the
you
movies.
need to watch it.
Jared also recommends
So
it.
you need to watch it, yeah.
Matt and I select the movies for this podcast by like picking our favorite movies that we want to show Jose. So like I'm always on the positive side. I'm always like rah rah this movie.
Well, this will be perfect then, because this
I'd
will be
love to
literally
rip a movie up.
this will be literally the exact opposite in the sense that both Matt and I have watched the movie. We don't like it, but you haven't, so we should watch it.
It's Jose's turn to
It's
share a
literally
movie.
just the entire opposite of the main premise of what we do. Yeah.
That is exactly.
Can you imagine someone looking through our lineup with all these like
Super-
critically acclaimed movies and then the Super Mario Brothers movie?
And that one takes the
from
longest to talk
1993.
about.
Why is this one 3.5 hours? Oh, sweet Jesus. How could they possibly talk about it for this long?
Well, we've completely trailed off of Fire in the Sky.
Oh my.
But and there was one more aspect of the movie that I was hoping to just like talk about a little bit. I know like
Oh, rock it away. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. I got nothing more to be.
the only other thing that like jumps out in this movie to me that I wanted to like get your guys' perspective on and kind of like bounce some ideas around is like the process, I guess, of like being rehabilitated back into your life after an experience like this, because that I think is really highlighted in the movie. It's like, you know, obviously when Travis comes back, he's not talking to anyone. They keep throwing him in crowds of people for some reason, and it's just like a really painful thing to watch. But after a couple of like 2.5 years, he seems relatively normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just open to your guys' thoughts on that, because I don't know if there would be going back to a relatively normal for me, or like jumping back into like getting married to your previous girlfriend or what.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine that slowly but surely, the nice thing about the human brain when it comes to traumas, right, that aren't continuously recurrent, you know, especially that one, because it was a one and done thing, right? Like, sure, it was 5 days of it happening to him, but, you know, then 2 years, you know, go by of good things, right? He's got, you know, somebody that loves him, you know, he's got a community that actually bothered to bring him back into the fold and stuff like that.
Both of those things help a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So between that, he was able to be, well, what do they call that when that happens to a prisoner? They, it's essentially rehabilitated, right? Like, they've been...
I use rehabilitate. It's more of like a term that's used for animals when you...
Right.
back in
I
the
mean,
wild,
I thought there was like a... a specific word to use for criminals when they've been been brought back into like society.
Oh yeah. What is that word?
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you're talking
Assimilated.
No.
I hope not. Good job, son. You've been re-assimilated.
about. Time to assimilate.
Yeah.
Are you ready for
Yeah,
assimilation?
that sounds like some Clockwork Orange shit. They're like when they catch you and then they're just like, don't worry, we'll re-assimilate you. Reform. Thank you.
Reform. Thank
Jesus.
you. Time coded ass.
Thank you. I was like, I knew it was a re-word.
Yeah.
Yep.
Reform is
yeah.
the word.
Yeah, because we said rehabilitated might be more for an animal, right? So.
Or like.
But yeah, reformed is the perfect word for it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, like that's usually the recipe, right? Even for an individual who's been a criminal, is the ability to have actual interpersonal, relations, and then a society that doesn't ostracize you for, for doing so. Which pretty much it kind of looked like Mike got the polar opposite of that, because even it seemed like people had already kind of made up their minds that even after he came back and stuff like that, like it didn't really seem like
he was already the scapegoat almost. Like,
Yeah,
he was the pariah for the community
Mm-hmm.
to throw their negative emotions at or something.
Yeah.
If that was the case, I don't know.
As Mike's position, that's a good point. I don't think I would, because he was like, what did Dallas called him, the pillar of the community,
Mm-hmm.
jokingly in one of those scenes. And it's like, having like a role like that where everybody trusts you and everybody likes you, and then when something crazy like this happens, no one in the community, including your own wife, having your back, I might not be able to get back into that community myself either, or feel fully invested in it. It's no wonder that he's living out like in the woods by himself.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, you want to talk about skepticism, right? I mean, he'd be skeptical of everybody there moving forward because, yeah, nobody's got his back. These are like his people, right?
He grew
like
up there.
Yeah, like that. Like there is no other place on Earth, you know what I mean, or the rest of the universe for his, for his ass. Like that. This is it.
Well, yeah, and he's like, they hint heavily in the beginning of the movie too, when they first come to the bar, restaurant, whatever it is with the story as well, is they're like you can take his word to the bank. You know that. You know that. Like, everybody in the community trusted and loved him, and basically this experience probably taught him that that's worth fuck all, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it kept them from not having to be booked only because of the fact that there wasn't just a tiny shred of extra evidence that would have pointed in that direction. Because again, I mean, like if we want to think about it like from like a Twilight Zone perspective, right? It's like,
Oh, I prefer to.
yeah, it's like it makes me think of like those makes me think of that like old episode where like the aliens are like fucking with the lights and like like messing with like people in like a small community and everybody starts turning on each other really really quickly.
Yeah.
Right. Which again, another means by which aliens could very easily just sow discord without even needing any sort of because again, I mean, perhaps if you want to think about it from the perspective that everything that the aliens do is an experiment, right? Like they don't make mistakes in that particular type of way. Like they could very well be like, okay, we're gonna keep this guy for 5 days. And then we're gonna see how his his place reacts, in that interim of time. Because I could imagine, right, that if what they really wanted was bodies, they didn't not see that truck full of other people, just roll right on by,
No, they
right?
know. Also, many parallels to the popular Jackbox game Push the Button for a quick call out if you want to watch all of your friendships fall apart before your eyes.
Yeah. That's very true. Yeah, that's exactly the same way.
I mean, yeah, people are afraid of what they don't understand, and when push comes to shove, it's my ass before yours,
Well, yeah, just wanting to just return to some form of normalcy as quickly as possible and being like, okay, I understand the world, like there is, like, I'm not 100% just bereft out in space, essentially. Like, yeah, because, fuck, I mean, like, again, like, we're pretty educated people in the degree that we're, skeptical and open-minded, enough to, like, play with ideas, right? And then, you bring this fantastic last story to individuals who, salt of the earth, only, like, if they don't think, they contemplate, throughout the day,
Oh, yeah. And this is easy as, like, an outside perspective watching the movie where you get to see, like, the scenes that the main characters seen. But, like, I grew up in a very small town, like 600 plus people by a little bit. If like 4 or 5 guys came back from, like, a logging trip and told this story, and I knew them since high school, I'd be like, one of these guys killed him.
Yeah.
For sure.
Especially, again, if you have an individual like Dallas along with them, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, like...
Who had an
Obviously, that fucking
altercation.
Especially because he left right away. Like, oh, goodness, like, well... Yeah. The only question at that point would be, why are these guys covering for him? Like, why aren't they just dropping, you know what I mean, the hammer on him?
Yeah, if his best friend's in the mix, too. Like, what exactly happened? Yeah, I sympathize with all perspectives, for sure. But I'm sure an experience like this definitely changes all parties involved lives in the future.
Yeah,
forever.
Well, I guess not really, because, I mean, they ended up just being a lumberman, I mean, like a logger again, and you know what I mean? Like, just continuing, I mean, they continued their life, you know what I mean, as far as things went, which I guess, I don't know this, but maybe you might, in terms of having seen that, that episode about this. Did they, like, try to seek any fame? You know what I mean? Like, were there any, like, fame hogs or anything like that? Like, you know, sure, like, their story might still have credence, you know what I mean? But sometimes when people have, you know, a story that has credence, they want to monetize on it in some way.
That
Especially,
was alluded to,
you know.
From what I remember...
Story rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could be wrong about this, but from what I remember is that for the most part, it didn't impact any of those guys' lives positively.
But
Or
we
that,
did
like,
just watch the movie, so somebody bought story
The
rights.
Travis Walton wrote a story about what happened to him, and he published it, and that's what this movie is based off.
Oh, fair enough. Okay.
So it's from the horse's mouth, technically speaking, and whether or not I don't think he's like affluent in any way. I know he's like a prominent figure in like UFO history, you know, as far as like his story goes and all the circumstances surrounding the town and everybody involved. But so it's possible. I think that he does make a cameo in this movie, if I remember reading that when I was skimming the wiki.
Maybe he was in the diner or something.
Yeah, something like that. And I'm sure, you know, but at the same time, fuck, if that should happen to me, I'd write a book about it too.
Oh, 100%.
Well, even just to get the story out.
I just want to tell people, like, believe me or not, this is what happened. And it's pretty
my
cool.
anecdotal facts.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the best of the recollection that I have.
Yeah.
For those of you who are interested, this is what happened to me.
Yeah, especially because I feel like it would eat you up. You know what I mean? Having had a traumatic experience like that and knowing that there's a possibility of that kind of thing happening out there and then not letting anyone know about it, right? It would beat me to the same degree of like getting attacked by an animal and never explaining to anyone like what kind of animal it was. Like what were you doing that made it happen? You know, like...
But even crazier because this is like so much an experience that is not common. People are curious about it. People do want to know from your perspective, true or false, what happened. Especially
if, I mean, curiosity was the thing that, you know, killed the cat in that particular way, right? Because if you wouldn't have gotten out of the truck, it could very well have been that the thing would have zoomed away, right?
Yeah.
And nobody would have been the wiser at the end of the day. They would have all just had a story to tell between, you know, but probably not even a story that they bothered to tell with each other because, like,
Probably
who the fuck's
not.
gonna believe me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, if me and my friends, like, if the three of us were in a truck driving by something like that and say we, like, stopped to look but then just, like, kept driving and, like, let's get out of here, I don't see us telling a lot of people other than, like, our close-knit group of friends.
Yeah, and trying to look as uncrazy as possible while telling it too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I would imagine that when it happens to you personally, you know, like, that wrestling of like I want to believe it because I just saw it, but at the same time, like how much evidence are my eyes really? You know, even
I think
to myself,
I would try. You know? I mean, honestly, like with myself, I feel like I would almost ask that each of us like write down what we saw without talking to each other, so we could like have them and look through.
And then write like 2 sentences and a little picture of what you thought we saw.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it'd be because
otherwise you change each other's stories.
Right.
Yeah, or add more skepticism to each other too. he's be like, no, we didn't see that. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, well there was lights, but I mean there's lights every day. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm super jealous of people that have experienced things like that.
Oh, you want the Travis experience?
Not that one in particular, but what were you gonna say?
oh, I was just thinking back of one particular scene that kind of struck me now that we're thinking about the fact that, like, you know, our world is kind of fantastical at this point too, right? Like, you know, try to rip anybody from time 100 years ago and, you know, drop them now, and they're like, what the fuck is this? You know, the fuck is this place, right? It kind of made me feel that way in that scene when the I think it's the main town sheriff. He's driving and he gets the call to go to the bar, and then all of a sudden you see the red lights come, and it looks like a saucer, you know, but then it comes to pass that it's like that it's quote unquote, and I'm saying this very poignantly in that way, just a train station, you know what I mean, light, you know what I mean, telling that's causing that. But you know, again, from that from our perspective, if you could pause the movie and then be like, okay, so what's gonna happen next? You know what I mean? In this alien movie, you know what I mean? Like, what do you think is gonna happen next?
It's an Independence Day type movie.
Yeah, or like a War of the Worlds, like they're landing in a whole bunch of places and like attacking people at the same time kind of situation.
Yeah. Did you ever, on that 100 years comment you made, I just wanted to ask, did you ever read The Time Machine, or are you familiar with that story?
Yeah, and the movie too. Oh, that movie is so good.
I never saw the movie,
What
but
a
I read the book
sad-ass movie.
when I was younger.
You've never watched that movie?
No, I didn't want to, like, I enjoyed the book so much, I was nervous, too. Because, like, I have so much of it that I, like, pictured myself, you know, and that kind of poisons the experience.
I get you.
But I think that's, like, a very similar, like, call-out, because he travels forward in time, I don't know how many years, but basically, like, the concept is that society reached, like, a breaking point with slavery, that, like, the human race branched off into separate species, and one is, like, a soft, like, ground-level species that's gotten small and basically like giggles and has sex all the time, and the like underground slave species is
they actually had the movie actually does a better job in my personal opinion, because because I think, I mean, from if what you're telling me is the theme of the far future aspect, if I'm recalling correctly, in the Time Machine movie, what happens is that in the year like 2050 we're doing initial moon colonization, and we're using nukes to essentially create like cracks in the moon in order to be able to do like fast construction. And in one of those situations, like, we accidentally fucking crack the moon essentially, and in cracking the moon there's like this gigantic, like, you know, tidal issues, and like, you know, like the world essentially becomes destroyed to a particular degree. And it's in that instance that he gets like knocked out, and he goes through like 1 billion years essentially, and like time, you know, like moves so forward that at that point they do get to that bisected species where he meets up with the soft people on the top, right?
And basically gains like a pet of a like future person. It's like a small woman from that time.
Well, no, like those people are still strong in that way, and at least in the movie.
Oh, but in the book they're like fragile little beings.
Oh no, yeah, in the movie, they're normal people, you know, but then the people who are underground are like straight up like gorilla men almost essentially, and they went down after like the whole nuclear like the whole shit with the moon and stuff like that, and bisected in that way, and became a hive mind, wherein like a lot of them, you know, they have, you know, like essentially they have one main, what they call them uruks, I believe, like one main guy essentially has like a brain running all the way down to his back, and he can psychically speak, or like at least control the other uruks, and tells them, he says that he's the reason why the people at top haven't gone extinct, because he keeps those, you know, the underground people from essentially overeating all the people on the top, you know.
And they're keeping the society functioning.
Yeah. I personally thought the movie actually did a better job in that way.
It does sound like there's different. You read the book too, then. Yeah. It does sound like there's some differences, but also my memory is foggy. I read it when I was pretty young.
Yeah.
So if I misquoted anything, my apologies to our couple of viewers. But that's what that reminds me of, is like, yeah, if we jumped forward like any amount of time, like, we've advanced very quickly, I think, in the last 100 years. Like, a minimum of 100 years, I think, would land us in something that was completely foreign.
Yeah, 100%. Again, yeah, just to reiterate my example of like if they left 100 years ago to go back to their to their main planet to just kind of refuel, you know what I mean, like change
Shifts.
Yeah, who knows, yeah. And now they're back and be like, hey, listen, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's only been 100 years. I mean, like, they've been at this feudal shit for like 500. I'm sure we'll be fine.
What's going to be different? Oh,
yeah.
they conquered senescence. What happened?
Goddamn.
How did they do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to think, technology exponentially speaking wise, like what, there's, if I remember reading this right, there's human trials for the mRNA vaccine for melanoma. It's like, holy shit, we're coming up on cancer now?
Hopefully.
That's pretty fantastical shit. If you would have told somebody 100 years ago that, if they understood what cancer was.
Right. Oh, man. Yeah. Great movie. I liked it.
Good.
Good.
Yeah. What you stars wise? You got a star? You put a couple on there?
Out of 5?
Yeah.
I'd say 4. 4 out of 5. I would remove the extra one just because of the fact that I thought that once Travis came back, I felt that everything just kind of got cleaned up too quickly.
I think that's fair.
I would imagine that, like, even though, sure, there's no murder anymore, right? Like, I thought that there was still going to be more with the Montana sheriff in terms of him just trying to sleuth something up in relation to being like, okay, like, where's the foul play here? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, the U.S. government paid me quite a bit of money to travel down here, and they're curious as to why. So.
Yeah, as to what on earth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so... Yeah, I thought the ending was a bit too tidy, especially considering that like they did the full 2-year jump, and they did my boy Mike real dirty. You know what I mean?
Your boy Kid Rock.
Yeah.
Full blown
Kid Rock. Yeah.
In the cabin. Like I think I know where that guy got his look from.
I mean, he shifted from like Billy Ray Cyrus to like Kid Rock to me, like depending on whether when he had like the long beard or like the.
Actually, because you said that, I do feel like he was just different versions of Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yep. Travis did break his breaky heart when he told him that he left him behind.
Oh, I think you just gave me cancer.
I do like that at the end of the movie they hit home like once more on like the selfishness of a community of people. That like I really felt that like when Travis like returned, the whole community was like, yay, all our problems are solved, let's throw a party, and there was really not any consideration for what Travis was going through. Like the fact that he was consistently crowded by media, by like just groups of people from the community, and then even his close-knit group of friends and family were like throwing surprise parties and stuff like that.
A perfect parallel to the Vietnam War. Yeah.
Jesus.
Because that's exactly what I imagine. That's exactly what happened, right?
We don't have another hour. If you're gonna start your Vietnam War rant again, we're gonna need
We've never solved it, all right?
You get your own episode. Jose talks about the Vietnam
Jose
War.
rants about the Vietnam War.
But yeah, I mean, think about it, right? I mean, the more I look at Dallas and like the getup that they have him in, he looks like he came from Vietnam. Like,
yeah, it's
like
bandana,
Vietnam. Yeah, like it's like one of those like nondescript, things that like I would imagine that what fucked him up was getting chewed up and spit out by that experience, and then he comes back here, highly volatile, gets a record for something. You know what I mean?
My favorite part of the podcast is when we give people backstories.
I think it's really fun. Yeah.
He deserves one.
Yeah.
Okay.
He does. He's such an interesting character.
Pretty pivotal.
Especially because, again, I thought he was going to be a far, far more far-reaching character in terms of how they were presenting, like him being used as a pivot, in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought his character was very interesting. it does put a lot of focus on it because it's like he's always kind of the risk in the situation. He doesn't cooperate with the police. He doesn't give clear answers to questions. He made the whole group look much more suspicious.
Which I think is actually, I mean, an intelligent ploy on his part, right? Because again, he is the most likely suspect, right? Like, he like stands nothing to gain, really, because if he starts to be too forthright, like, why is this guy being so forthright? Like, like
it's a bad route.
Yeah, like even being earnest, you know what I mean, just from his unfortunate aesthetics, you know what I mean, and the get up and
unfortunate aesthetics.
Yeah, like everything about him just screams like
murderer.
Be prejudicial to me is essentially what I'm trying to get at. You know, so because of that, like, he doesn't stand to gain to like try to be honest with the police. So at this point, the best thing he can do is muddy the water for everybody as much as he possibly can. Be like, those guys, I'm innocent, but they're as innocent as I am. You know what I mean? Like,
because there's more to it too. Because like obviously on the day that everything happened, like they allude to like him and Travis having fights pretty much every day up to that point in the car ride on the way to the job site. And then once they're there, they have some, I would say, very concerning altercations with, like, dropping the tree and, like, the chainsaw. Like, he's for sure in an incredibly compromised situation out the gate, and he knows it.
Mm-hmm. And this is one instance in a week, right, of them, you know, who knows what little escalating games they could have been playing with each other. Especially considering that whole cut thing, right? Because that looked like it was already cut, like sealed by that point, but it probably had happened like 2-3 days prior to, right? So yeah, I mean,
you know, that is one thing I think that this movie does much better than almost every other alien abduction, fourth kind style movie, is that like most like alien abduction stories, the most intriguing element aside from the aliens is the human perspective, and and this one just nails it. You know,
better than I think any movie I've seen. I think this is why this sticks with me so much, is like you totally get it from Travis's perspective, like right out of the gate when we were watching the movie, when he like breaks out of like the organic kind of bubble he's in.
Oh, it's just
like,
one long. Yeah.
I'm going through all these thoughts for him, where I'm like, do you know there's oxygen out there? You know, like you really experience it with his level of knowledge.
But also, and just like the interplay with the community and the other lumberjacks and the sheriffs, and like, it's like these are all the shit. Like, this is all the shit that's actually important to us on, like, the real reality level. And the fantastical story aside, like, this is, like, it's, like, a good way of, like, Invincible was a good way of showing actual repercussions from real superheroes. This is, like, a movie showing the actual repercussions from a person having experienced an abduction, whether it happened or not.
Yeah, it's more focused on that than anything else.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the Twilight Zone, because that's what made the Twilight Zone so great, right? Is like they didn't just do like surface level thematic aspects of it. They went into like, okay, so what are the consequences of this situation happening? You know, and
like actually think about it.
Yeah,
what's
and
the consequences of progression?
And I mean, like, yeah, this movie is like perfect for that. I mean, sans just Rod Sterling appearing and being like, submit it for your approval. Yeah.
I can never not hear the scary noise. Every time I hear Rod Sterling's voice or an impersonation of it.
Yeah.
Here we have Mike, a normal man, trying hard to maintain the bills.
This was like a family tradition growing up. Is actually like on New Year's Eve they would play the Twilight Zone on like cable, and we would watch it as late as we could stay up on New Year's Eve every year.
Yeah, once they're both in the truck at the end, Rod Sterling appears again. It's like, truth, truth, myth. You be the judge. One thing is for sure, the human spirit will live on.
You clearly have watched a lot. Like you're really nailing
100%,
it.
Yeah. I love the black and white Twilight Zone.
It's so
I
good.
want this to be our future sign-off, is you as Rod Sterling.
Every time we start off, we're like, submitted for your approval.
And then at the end, I need it now.
Well, I would have to like make up a little paragraph, because they're different for every single one.
Yeah.
It's worth it, I think.
We'll make you write it before we start the podcast. All right, go.
That's what I was thinking when you called out name drop last podcast on the left. You were like, they did a really good job of like compiling the details from the and like my only thought was like, yeah, real podcasts prepare for their podcast.
Some guy writes notes and lines and shit.
Someone does the research, someone has a sign off.
No, if we research, how can we introspect? No.
Yeah.
We're
100% authentic on this channel.
That's why I try to be the straight man. To these two numbskulls.
Well, damn. Great movie. I don't think there's anything left for me to say.
Yeah, we pretty much went through the whole thing.
It was a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, it most certainly, makes... If I were more hyper skeptical to the consideration of aliens being out there, I feel like this movie's story would add a wrinkle to it, knowing the fact that everybody lived their life, you know what I mean? But that still traumatized them,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but I'm glad to be on team not abducted yet so far.
Yeah. Me too.
Didn't you earlier in this podcast just say I'm so jealous of people who have had experiences like
Not
this?
like this. You said his experience. I said, no, not like that. I just want to see something cool. That's all. I'll take the camera phone video and not be on the mushroom pod. That's my take. Hot take.
Hot take.
Very brave.
Thank you.
Let's end it with that.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Have a good day and a good night.
Good night.